The evening my sister introduced me as the harmless one, something deep inside me shattered, though only my heart could hear the sound. She spoke the words so casually, as if she were referring to an old piece of furniture that nobody had ever valued. Everyone laughed, including my mother. No one noticed how rigid I became, and no one cared enough to notice. In that instant, I understood something painful. I could disappear from that room, from that family, from that entire version of my existence, and not a single person would stop talking long enough to wonder where I had gone. My name is Linda Wells, and that night marked the final moment I allowed anyone else to define me. The last rotor blade eventually came to a stop on the rain-soaked landing pad, yet the silence that followed seemed louder than the storm itself. The atmosphere carried the sharp scent of fuel and seawater, the kind that settles into your skin and lingers long after the weather clears. I sat alone inside the operations cabin while the generators gradually quieted, leaving behind only the steady sound of seawater dripping from my boots. Relief should have been the dominant feeling. 27 people had survived. A vessel had been lost, but every life had been saved. Even so, a heaviness remained in my chest that no amount of wind could sweep away. Every storm speaks with its own voice, but the most dangerous ones are the moments when everything suddenly becomes silent. By the time I arrived in Norfolk, the world outside had taken on a dark, metallic appearance. My apartment was modest and nearly empty, still carrying a faint reminder of the ocean. I hung my flight jacket, removed my gloves, and set my phone on the table. Instantly, the screen illuminated with one notification after another. Don't forget Elna's engagement next week. Ryan is wonderful. We're all so happy for her. Come early, and please don't wear your uniform. People won't understand. That final sentence struck a place within me that should have stopped hurting years ago. I opened my laptop, intending to complete the mission report, but another email appeared before I could begin. Subject: Incident Review, Balfour Operation. 6 simple words, as cold and unforgiving as steel. An incident review meant that an investigation had officially begun. I kept staring at the monitor until my own reflection dissolved into the pale light of the screen. Outside, the wind continued its quiet movement, gentle yet relentless, as though it were waiting. I switched on the lamp, opened the weathered notebook I always carried, and paused at the final page. A sentence I had written 2 years earlier stared back at me. Silence can drown even the strongest person, unless they learn when to speak. I closed the notebook and allowed the room to return to stillness, realizing that those words might become important far sooner than I had ever expected. I departed Norfolk on a pale Saturday morning beneath a sky that made everything appear faded and only partially awake. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, long, gray, and unbroken, drawing me towards something I couldn't yet identify. The sound of the tires and the soft music from the radio blended into the background, but my thoughts kept returning to that email. Incident Review. 2 ordinary words capable of transforming months of hard work and difficult decisions made during chaos into a single unanswered question. When I reached Charleston, the air had grown thick with humidity. I stopped at a small rest area near the old base where I had once trained new rescue teams. Lieutenant Ramos was already there, standing beneath the shelter with a cup of coffee and an expression that warned me I wasn't going to appreciate what he had to say. He handed me a wrinkled fax, its ink partially blurred by the rain. "You need to look at this," he said. "The Balfour investigation has officially been approved. Someone claims you gave the wrong order and caused damage to federal property." I raised my eyes to meet his. "Who filed the complaint?" "Elliot Haskins," he answered quietly. "The nephew of Admiral Haskins. And the Admiral still carries considerable influence on the Atlantic Board." The rain pounded the pavement more heavily. I folded the document once and slipped it into my jacket. "Thanks, Ramos. I'll handle the rest." He hesitated before speaking. "They aren't going to make this easy for you." "They never do," I replied, turning back toward my car. The highway swallowed me once more. I switched on the radio simply to push back the silence. A local news anchor was covering the storm. 27 survivors were rescued last night by a Coast Guard team led by Commander Linda Wells. I turned the radio off immediately. Hearing my own name presented like a headline felt strange and distant, as though they were referring to a person who no longer existed. Rain began falling again, gently at first, and then with steady determination. The windshield wipers moved in rhythm with my thoughts. Somewhere between the static on the radio and the sound of tires against wet asphalt, I realized that this journey was about far more than returning home. I was driving directly into another storm. By late afternoon, Savannah glowed beneath golden sunlight. The city looked almost impossibly perfect. Spanish moss draped itself from ancient oak branches, swaying lazily above the cobblestone streets. Beauty that flawless had always unsettled me. The place concealed things remarkably well. The riverside estate my mother had reserved for Elena's engagement celebration was already alive with activity. Florists moved in carrying large buckets filled with white roses, while the catering staff carefully arranged table linens in elegant champagne shades. My mother glided among them like a film director overseeing a production, perfectly composed and entirely in command. Her hair was immaculate, and her pearl necklace sat flawlessly in place. The moment she noticed me, her eyes traveled from head to toe, the way one might inspect ceremonial attire before an important occasion. "You look nice," she remarked, wearing that gentle smile she always used whenever her true meaning lay somewhere beneath the surface. "Just remember, don't mention your work tomorrow. Elena and Ryan deserve all the attention. Honestly, nobody here really understands what you do out there." I had never intended to discuss it anyway. "Of course," I answered. "You're always so thoughtful," she replied, already turning away to direct someone else. Thoughtful. Such an elegant expression for learning how to erase yourself. Later, upstairs, I was unpacking my things when Elena burst into the room. She radiated the kind of confidence that belongs to people who have never truly experienced failure. The scent of expensive perfume followed her, mingled with complete self-assurance. "Ryan is so excited to meet you," she said, brushing invisible dust from my shoulder. "Just try not to make him uncomfortable about the Coast Guard stuff. You know how proud he is of serving in the Navy. He takes it very seriously." A faint smile crossed my face. "Don't worry, Elena. I'm used to remaining quietly in the background." She laughed, completely missing the meaning behind my words, then skipped away humming some tune about weddings. That evening, dinner revolved around harmless conversation and endless plans for the engagement festivities. My mother discussed floral designs while Elena talked enthusiastically about photographers. Their voices gradually blended into the constant murmur of the river beyond the windows, the gentle heartbeat of Savannah after dark. When I finally looked at my phone, a new notification flashed across the screen. "Meeting confirmed. 0600, Monday, Norfolk HQ." A summons. I read the message twice, feeling the atmosphere around me grow heavier. Outside, the river touched the wooden supports with slow, measured rhythms. There was a time when that sound represented peace. Now it felt more like a warning. Another storm was gathering somewhere beyond the horizon, and this time there would be no forecast announcing its arrival. I've never enjoyed gatherings where every laugh sounds identical. That evening, the ballroom overlooking the Savannah River glimmered with golden light. Chandeliers poured brilliance across polished floors, and every smiling face carried the kind of happiness that only exists when others are watching. I stood among them in a pale blue dress, smiling only enough to become invisible. When introductions began, my mother rested a hand upon my shoulder. Her voice was gentle, perfectly practiced. "This is Linda, Elena's older sister. She used to work at sea. She's stable now." Stable. A word intended to reassure everyone, yet it struck like a sentence already passed. One woman leaned closer. "Coast Guard, right? Did you teach swimming, or were you more involved with paperwork?" The entire table laughed. I returned the smile. Sometimes both. Their laughter only grew louder, completely unaware of everything I had chosen not to say. Elena moved through the room like sunlight itself, admired by everyone and flawless in their eyes. Soon, she guided Ryan over to meet me, proud to introduce the man she loved. His handshake was firm. His expression remained courteous, though emotionally distant. "It's good to meet you. I've worked with a few people from the Guard before." He spoke with the confidence of someone accustomed to being heard rather than challenged. I eventually slipped onto the balcony, where the river shimmered beneath the moonlight in dark, silver waves. Behind me, I heard my mother telling someone that I was still unmarried, but doing well. Doing well. That's the phrase people choose when they can't think of anything more meaningful to admire. Then Ryan rose to deliver his toast. "Last year, I was involved in a mission near Beaufort. The waves reached 20 feet. We would have lost people if our SEAL commander hadn't changed our heading at exactly the right moment." Everything inside me went still. He had remembered it incorrectly. The course, the direction, the timing. The storm returned to me in an instant, every sound and every command perfectly clear. "Proceed on 162 degrees. I slowly placed my glass on the table. When I spoke, my voice remained calm and unwavering. It wasn't 180. The wind shifted toward the southeast. 162 was what kept you alive. The entire room went silent. Ryan stared at me in disbelief. "You were there," he said. "I gave that order." "I did," I replied. He straightened his posture and lifted his hand in a flawless salute. The sharp sound echoed through the stillness like rolling thunder. 3 nearby SEALs immediately followed his example. A retired admiral stepped forward. "Commander Wells, your Beaufort reports have been part of our Norfolk training programs for years." Whispers spread across the room. Elena's smile began to fade, while my mother's hand trembled so badly that her glass nearly slipped. "You're a commander?" she whispered. "I always have been," I answered softly. Then my phone vibrated. A message appeared on the screen. "Effective immediately. Commander Wells is suspended pending investigation. Report to Norfolk headquarters at 0600 hours. The breath left my body. I quietly tucked the phone into my clutch and looked directly at Elena. "You really couldn't let me have this one night, could you?" she hissed. "Don't worry," I replied calmly. "I don't need your spotlight. I only need the truth." Nobody attempted to stop me as I walked away. Behind me, the laughter slowly returned, muted and empty, as though the storm outside had swallowed every sound. Rain consumed Savannah. Streetlights shimmered across flooded roads while I gripped the steering wheel, my pulse still hammering inside my chest. Ryan called 3 separate times. I ignored every one. Messages from headquarters continued flooding my screen. "Report immediately." The storm outside felt no different from the one growing within me. Every mile north dragged old memories back to the surface, the crackling radio transmissions from Beaufort, the crashing waves, and the voices that had once trusted my judgment. Then the phone rang again. It was Ramos. "Commander, I've seen the suspension order. Admiral Haskins signed it personally. His nephew filed the complaint." "You're sure?" I asked. "Absolutely. They're turning you into the scapegoat." My hands tightened around the wheel until the leather groaned beneath my grip. If they wanted a storm, I would gladly give them one. As I crossed the bridge, a pair of headlights appeared through the heavy rain. Ryan stood directly ahead, soaked completely, blocking my lane. I lowered the window halfway. "What are you doing here?" "Apologizing," he said, struggling to catch his breath. "I didn't realize it was you in Beaufort. You saved my life. I owe you everything." "You don't owe me anything," I answered. "I was doing my job." "No, you need to hear this. Haskins mentioned your name. He's coming after you." I looked at him through the curtain of rain. "I've survived 80-knot winds, Captain. I'll survive this too." He stepped aside, and I continued driving. The wipers moved faster, drowning out even the rhythm of my own heartbeat. Static crackled through the radio before a weather bulletin interrupted. Small boats were being warned to remain ashore along Virginia's coastline. Maybe it was simply a forecast. Or maybe it was a warning. Lightning tore across the sky, painting the wet asphalt in flashes of silver. Every strike brought back the same memory, the screaming wind, the decision I made, and the 31 lives that were saved because of it. Now that very choice had become a weapon aimed directly at me. I increased the volume and allowed the sound of rain to erase everything behind me. The highway stretched ahead like a single endless wave. I pressed harder on the accelerator, driving straight into the storm that had been waiting for me all along. The rain followed me out of Savannah, pounding against the windshield like 1,000 tiny betrayals. The road ahead dissolved into shades of gray, while headlights scattered across puddles that reflected absolutely nothing. I wasn't exhausted. I was empty. It was the particular kind of emptiness that comes from realizing you've spent years existing as someone else's afterthought. Ryan's name lit up my phone once again. I ignored it while crossing the Ravenel Bridge. Eventually, I pulled over, stepped into the storm, and let the rain soak completely through my clothes. The city lights disappeared behind me, consumed by darkness. Only hours earlier, an entire room had finally seen who I truly was. Now, I was suspended. I once believed storms ended after you escaped them, but sometimes they simply learn your name instead. My phone rang again. Ramos's voice fought through the static. "Commander, I've confirmed it. Admiral Haskins personally signed the suspension order, and his nephew, Elliot, filed the complaint. So that was the truth. Not procedure. Politics. Keep a copy," I told him. "I'm returning tonight. Are you sure you don't need some time off?" "I don't get time off." By 2 in the morning, I stopped at a gas station. The rain still hadn't weakened. Ryan called once more. This time, I answered. "They're calling you reckless around the base," he said. "Haskins wants Beaufort to become an example. I won't allow that. You don't owe me anything." "Ryan, this isn't about debts," he replied. "You saved my life. They're rewriting the past." "Then let them write whatever they want," I said quietly. "I'll correct their grammar afterward." I ended the call. Lightning ripped open the horizon, revealing the highway ahead, long, merciless, and offering no exits. Just before dawn, I finally reached Norfolk. The rain had softened into a thin mist. 2 junior officers stood outside the hangar. One of them whispered, "That's her. The woman who gave the wrong order." I heard every word and remained silent. After all, being misunderstood by strangers is the easiest burden to carry. But when the very institution meant to protect you turns away, it leaves behind a scar that never truly heals. The hearing chamber was stark, bright, and unwelcoming, filled with glass walls and harsh fluorescent lighting. 6 officers sat opposite me, with Admiral Haskins positioned at the center. "Commander Wells," he began, "you stand accused of altering your course without authorization, resulting in damages amounting to $400,000. What do you have to say in your defense?" "Radar records, signed documents, and an audio transmission," I answered calmly as I presented the evidence. I played the recordings. Winds shifted southeast at 21:43. Course adjusted to 162. Elliot cut in immediately. "You fabricated that." Without hesitation, I slid the logbook across the table. "That handwriting belongs to you, Lieutenant." The room fell into complete silence. Then I played the radio communication. My voice was heard first, requesting a heading adjustment to 162. Moments later came his uncle's unmistakable response. "Proceed to 162. Confirmed." The atmosphere instantly froze. One of the younger officers turned toward Haskins. "Sir, that's your voice." He remained silent. Finally, the chairman spoke. "The suspension is hereby lifted. Commander Wells acted according to protocol. Admiral Haskins, prepare your report." I rose and offered a salute. "Thank you for allowing me to speak." Outside, the breeze carried the scent of salt and warm sunlight. My phone vibrated. "Ryan, you've been cleared," he said. Word spreads quickly. "I'm going to tell Elena everything." "Then tell her the truth," I replied before ending the call. The storm was over, yet another one still waited for me in Savannah. Later that afternoon, I sat alone in a modest room overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. The sky had taken on the hard gray color of steel. When the review board entered, none of them met my eyes. The senior officer delivered the verdict with a voice as dry and lifeless as paper. "Commander Wells acted within SEAL protocol. There are no grounds for suspension. Admiral Haskins will remain on administrative leave, pending further investigation. I simply nodded. There was no applause, no congratulations, no handshakes. Only the hollow scrape of chairs across the floor as they departed, leaving me in silence. The fluorescent lights reflected off the metal table, revealing a version of myself I barely recognized, exhausted, pale, and hollow-eyed. The truth had restored my reputation, but it had also stripped away everything else. People often claim that truth sets you free, yet they rarely mention the loneliness that comes with it. Sometimes, it leaves you standing entirely on your own. Outside, the wind swept along the pier, carrying the sharp taste of salt water. I removed my cap and let the breeze pull gently through my hair. The ocean rested in deceptive stillness, pretending that peace had always existed. My phone buzzed once more. A message from Ryan appeared. They can never rewrite the ocean. Thank you. I chose not to reply. At that moment, silence meant more to me than gratitude. As the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, I understood where I needed to go next, Savannah. Not to seek vindication, but to finally close a wound that had remained open for far too many years. Savannah welcomed me beneath a gray sky, the air heavy with the promise of rain. The house by the river looked exactly as it always had, beautiful, polished, and strangely unreal. The same curtains hung in place. The familiar scent of lilies remained. The same illusion of warmth lingered, never truly touching the walls. My mother sat on the porch when I arrived. Her hands trembled ever so slightly the moment she saw me. Inside, Elena and Ryan were removing the last dried flowers from the engagement celebration, the night everything had begun to unravel. For several moments, nobody spoke. The silence among us carried more weight than any accusation ever could. Eventually, my mother's voice broke through. "You're not angry with me, are you?" "No," I answered. "I'm simply exhausted from making myself smaller so that everyone else can remain comfortable." She lowered her gaze. "I only wanted to protect Elena. She's always feared being compared to others. I never realized how much you've changed." A faint smile crossed my face. "I haven't changed, Mother. I've only survived longer." Elena stepped forward, her eyes red and swollen. "I was wrong. I never understood everything you've carried." "You don't need to understand it," I told her gently. "Just remember that respect can save someone in ways that pity never will." Ryan approached quietly and handed me an envelope. "SEAL Command wanted you to receive this. It's an official recognition for saving lives in Beaufort." The statement inside was simple. In recognition of Commander Linda Wells, whose leadership prevented the loss of U.S. personnel. I folded the letter carefully and nodded. "Thank you, Ryan. Documents may preserve the facts, but peace comes from knowing I did the right thing." My mother reached for my hand, her voice trembling. "Can you forgive me?" "You don't need forgiveness," I said softly. "You only need to stop believing that I must shrink so others can grow." The wind drifted across the porch, bringing with it the scent of wet earth and river water. For the first time in years, the silence no longer hurt. It simply settled around us. And within that quiet, I understood something important. I didn't need to win. I only needed to let go. I returned to Norfolk at dawn. The horizon still seemed half asleep, painted in pale shades of gold as the first sunlight touched the sea. The water was calm, smooth as glass, a sacred kind of stillness after so many storms. Wearing my uniform, I walked along the pier. No one else was there. Only gulls circled overhead while gentle waves tapped against the dock. My phone vibrated once. A message from Elena appeared. "I told everyone about you. They deserve to know who you really are." I smiled quietly. There was no longer any need for apologies. No need to be fully understood. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and stood motionless, allowing the morning wind to pass through me. Sunlight reflected from the silver insignia on my shoulder, a brief flash of something genuine and enduring. I thought about the storms, the rescues, the laughter I never shared, and the names I carried in silence. All of it narrowed into a single truth. I was still here. No applause. No headlines. Only the steady breathing of someone who had endured. As I turned away from the pier and left the tide behind me, I finally understood. Some battles do not conclude with victory. They end with peace. And peace, I realized, was